Today we're going to talk about how to use a skew. My name is Trent Watts and I'm with the Hub City Turners. Gary Von Custer is running the camera for us today, and we're going to make a short video on some of the ways to avoid big trouble with a skew. The skew is basically a piece of flat metal with the edges ground equally so that they meet somewhere near the center. The cutting edge is along here. I like to use what Richard Raffin calls a radiused skew, where this is on a radius as opposed to straight. It gives me a little bit more flexibility when I'm engaging the point for cutting. The angle between here is variable. The longer these points, so the sharper this angle, the less stable the point is, but the cleaner it cuts. So if this is quite blunt, then you're going to have an edge that will last longer, but I find it a little bit more difficult to cut. I can't tell you what the right angle is here. You can try different angles and make one that works for you. That isn't as important as how you hold the skew onto the wood. You can cut with the long point down, which would look like this, or you can cut with the short point down, which would look like this. Most of the time I am probably using the short point down, but there's times when either way works better. If you're cutting a skew, the most important thing I can talk to you today about is where the wood contacts the cutting edge. This part down here is closest to the tool rest when I'm cutting short edge down. If I'm cutting long edge down, this part is closest to the tool rest. I hardly ever cut anything in this part here. All my cutting is done at the extreme edges of the wood. The reason that's important is fairly obvious if I hold this on here and I turn it by hand. Okay, so there I'm rubbing my bevel. This is the bevel all back in here. If I put it on like that, I can rub this all day and it's not going to cut. But as I roll this down, then that edge starts to come in contact with the wood. You can see there now how it's cutting right on the very tip. And if I drift over and move like this and it starts to engage here, it's got that whole piece in contact and it's going to snap this down. And if you've ever had this happen, you'll understand what I say when it's going to create some screw threads. It just rips off very, very fast, and you get kind of a circular groove in the wood. And the same thing happens this way. Now I'm in contact with the wood, and I'm cutting. As I drift back here, boom, I snap down. I'll show you that with the lathe actually running. Now I'm going to slow the lathe right down. So I've slowed the lathe right down so that it isn't dangerous. And I'm going to show you what happens when you start to drift over. So this is where I want my cut to be. And all of a sudden I drift here and it jams down like that. And you can see the spiral cut. The same thing happens this way. If I'm cutting in here and I start to drift down, it grabs and it pulls it down like that. Those are relatively easy to avoid if you start and just make your cut so that it's on the very tip and never ever let the wood come in contact with here. So one of the ways of helping to establish that is running it back up here, and then as you pull it down, you can feel it start to come in contact. I'm just going to speed the lathe up so we can see that work. Start very safe by pulling up here And as I come down, I can feel it start to get in contact. Then I can turn it over and I can do the same thing, rub the bevel, pull it down until it starts to come in contact. So that's the essence of using a skew for making a flat planing cut where you're trying to get the wood even all the way across. There are a number of other cuts that you can do with a skew, like making beads and coves and angles, but what I really wanted to show today was just the essence of keeping your cut closer to the tool rest to avoid the fulcrum effect where you get that incredible angle and it just snaps your tool down, and it can do a lot of damage. We'll talk about some of those other cuts in another video. Just before we sign off and end the video, I wanted to talk a little bit about how to hold the tool and position your body to effect the maximum control and completely tame that skew. Hand position is really important for any tool that you're going to use. There's a lot of different ways to hold the skew so that it's secure. Like with pretty much all turning, I like to have the handle in contact with my body, and then this hand is controlling where it is on the tool rest, and I'm using my whole body to move back and forth. I'm not just pushing with my hands like that. I've got my body tight, and then I can come across like this, and I've got way more control. And if I flip the tool over this way, I'm doing the same cut but from the other direction, and I'm pulling my body. I've got my knees and my feet planted. My feet are planted securely, and my knees are in a flexed position so that I can move this along in a very comfortable way without having something poking me. If this is sitting up here, if the handle is sitting here and it's in my way, I can feel uncomfortable. So always get yourself set up so that you're really comfortable as you move into whatever cut it is that you're doing.